of the Blue Dolphins. In the early 1800s, a Native American girl named Karana lives with her people on an island off the coast of California. After most of the men are killed by Aleut hunters, the rest of Karana's people decide to board a ship headed for the mainland. When Karana discovers that her brother Ramo has been left behind, she dives off the ship and swims back to the island. While trying to bring them back to a canoe, Ramo is killed by a pack of wild dogs, leaving Karana all alone. I do not remember much of this time, except that many suns rose and set. I thought about what I was going to do now and that I was alone. I did not leave the village. Until I had eaten all of the bolognese did I leave, and then only to gather more. Yet I do remember the day that I decided I would never live in the village again. It was the morning of a thick fog and the sound of far-off waves breaking on the shore. I had never noticed how silent the village was. Fog crept in and out of the empty huts. It made shapes as if ships drifted, and they reminded me of all the people who were dead and those who were gone. The noise of the surf seemed to be their voices speaking. I sat for a long time, seeing these shapes and hearing the voices, until the sun came out of the fog, vanished. Then I made a fire against the wall of the house. When it was burned to the earth, I started a fire in another house. Thus, one by one, I destroyed them all so that there were only ashes left to mark the village of Galasat. There was nothing to take away with me except a basket of food. I therefore traveled fast, and before night fell, I reached the place where I had decided to live until the ship returned. This place lay on a headland a half-league to the west of Coral Cove. There was a large rock on that headland and two stunted trees. Behind the rock was a clear place about 10 steps across, which was sheltered from the wind, from which I could see the harbor and the ocean. A spring of water flowed from a ravine nearby. That night I climbed onto the rock to sleep. It was so flat on the top and wide enough for me to stretch out. Also, it was high from the ground that I did not need to fear the wild dogs while I was sleeping. I had not seen them since the day they had killed Ramo, but I was sure they would soon come to my new camp. The rock was a safe place to store the food I had brought with me and everything I should gather. Since it was still winter and any day the ship might return, there was no use to store food I would not need. This gave me time to make weapons to protect myself from the dogs, which I felt would sometime attack me, to kill them all one by one. I had a club I found in one of the huts, but I needed a bow and arrow and a large spear. The spear which I had taken from the slain dog was too small. It was good for spearing fish and little else. The laws of Galasat forbade the making of weapons by women of the tribe, so I went out to search for any that might have been left behind. I went first to where the village had been and sifted the ashes for spearheads, and then, finding none, to the place where the canoes were hidden, believing that the weapons might have been stored there with the food and the water. I found nothing in the canoes under the cliff. Then, remembering the chests of the Aleuts that I had brought to the shore, I set out for Coral Cove. I had seen that chest on the beach before during the battle, but did not remember that the hunters had taken it with them when they fled. The beach was empty except for rolls of seaweed washed in by the storm. The tide was out, and I looked in the place where the chest had lain. It was just below the edge Ulap and I had stood on while we watched battle. The sand was smooth, and I dug many small holes with a stick. I dug in a wide circle, thinking that the storm might have covered it with sand. Near the near the center of the circle, and the stick hit something hard, which I was sure was a rock. But as I dug deeper with my hands, I saw it was the black lid off the chest.